Hello, everybody. This is Fernando for the latest Ghosts and Spirits podcast. Well, I hope everyone is having a great Labor Day. Today is a nice, restful day for myself, so I thought I would create a special edition video where I would talk about a very famous ghost or spirit, if you will, and that has to do with the Annabelle doll. I think this has been suggested in the past, and the only reason I haven't done it is because those of you that know me through these videos know that I hardly ever talk about anything all-star related. Most of the information is already shared with the world, but I came across this website, thewarrens.net, and they did a pretty good summation of the doll itself, so I wanted to share it with everyone here because it would give me an opportunity to share really what happened as opposed to what the movies seem to state about Annabelle Doll. In fact, I'm not even going to cover anything related to the recent movies themselves, only because of course anything involving movies, it's always dramatized. There's a lot of fiction within them. Instead, the only thing I'll be presenting is the real stuff, the real things that occurred with the Annabelle Doll. So if you wanted to ever know the real history of the Annabelle Doll and not have it be one of those videos that are constantly on YouTube where they just share like one or two quick text pictures and then that's it with some heavy rock music. No, this will be more in-depth, so I thought I would create a special edition for you here. Now, with regards to the Annabelle doll, it is of course probably the most famous haunted doll of all. I also did this video because Robert the doll seems to be one of my most viewed, I guess, videos. Even to this day, I still check the comments on YouTube, and every day there's always new comments related to it and new views related to it. So definitely the dolls, when I talk about them here, especially the more famous ones, they absolutely get some good interest. So I wanted to do that as well. The Annabelle doll, you have to go back to the 1970s to when it first started. Now, the very first instance known about the doll itself was when it was found in a hobby store. It was found by the mother who purchased it for her daughter Donna. The year was 1970. The mother found this Raggedy Ann doll, which basically that's what it is. It's a Raggedy Ann doll inside a hobby store. There's no known history of this doll before it arrived at the hobby store, though. I don't know if the doll was a new doll, say like something straight off the retail side, just straight off a truck, or if the hobby store was more like a used store where it was a hand-me-down, a doll who's, someone else had possession of it and then placed it there. I don't know. So if anyone has that information of any of the earlier history before the most well-known history, then that'd be great to hear. So anyways, the mother purchased a doll, and she purchased it for her daughter Donna because at that time Donna was going to college and she was about to graduate with her nursing degree. And so she was living in an apartment with a roommate of hers named Angie. So Donna and Angie living in that same apartment now had possession of this doll as a gift from their mother. I think she probably bought it more like a graduation gift of some sort. And so Donna took the doll and then, as a nice form of decoration, placed it on her bed, and then that was it. To her, that was the history of the doll. But lo and behold, a couple of days later, that's when some strange things started happening with the doll itself. Apparently, just like Robert the doll, Annabelle the doll started to move on its own. These were tiny movements at first. It's the kind of thing where if you put let's say a doll in a certain position, let's say lying down, and then whenever you come back into the room, it's just slightly changed or slightly tilted to another position, you kind of question yourself and wonder, did I leave it like that? I thought I did, or I thought I didn't. And then that's when, again, you push it out of your head like, no, it can't be that this thing is moving by itself. But little by little, Annabelle the doll started to move further on its own, so much so that instead of the two women there, Donna and Angie, finding the doll, let's say, in different positions, now they will find the doll within a completely different room. So much so that if, for example, Donna placed the doll there in her bedroom, she would come home and then she would find it in the kitchen. And then not only that, but she would find it cross-legged, like let's say sitting on some couch, arms folded. Other times it would be found in the dining room, leaning against a chair. In other words, completely different from when it was first placed. And then I guess the utmost time was whenever she had the doll locked someplace, she went back into the apartment later on, only to find the doll in the bedroom with the door closed. So how the doll could move out of a locked place and then go back to another room and then find the room itself locked, showcasing how utterly unbelievable something like this would be. Who knows? But it certainly wasn't her roommate Angie doing this, and it wasn't Donna. It was the doll itself doing all of this by itself. Now that's the first part, the imperceptible movements and then the more broader movements. The second part, with the Annabelle doll and the things that it would do, happened to do with messages. There was at some point where Donna and Angie began to find on some kind of paper called parchment paper several messages, presumably from the doll itself, and they were written on some kind of pencil, if I'm not mistaken. They didn't have a pencil at that time, from what I've read of some of the other accounts. Like, they had pens and they had certain other types of writing materials, but I don't think they had that specific pencil that whatever Annabelle doll was using to write with was using. And the way it was written, it was as if it was written by the letterings of a small child. You know how those big chief tablets, how they have those specific fonts on the front that showcase the handwriting of a child? Well, that's how they would find these messages on that parchment paper. And they would find this paper stenciled or penciled around various parts of the house or the apartment itself. They specifically had two messages. One of them was "Help Us," and the other one was "Help Lou," L-O-U, presumably a name of some sort. And again, neither Donna or neither Angie, the two roommates, they didn't keep any of this paper, they didn't keep any of this pencil, so they were completely perplexed as to where this stuff was coming from, and how, of course, the doll presumably was able to do all of this, considering it's a doll itself. So this was a tipping point for them, and they decided they wanted to go ahead and get some professional help, and they got this through the form of a seance. So they brought in some kind of medium or some kind of mystic, and immediately this medium saw that this was the works of the doll itself. And whenever this happened, that's when they held like a seance of some sort, and the medium was able to, I guess, contact whatever was within the doll itself. And when that happened, that's when the doll told the medium to tell Donna and Angie that she actually comes from a young girl by the name of my apologies, one moment, Annabelle Higgins. So that's why the doll itself is called Annabelle, because it comes from purportedly this young girl. And she was 7 years old. Apparently at those apartments before they were built, there was another residence of some sort. And at 7 years old, her lifeless body was found in some field near where that apartment complex now stood. So supposedly, based on what the information was being fed by the doll, it was basically the life or the essence or the spirit of a young girl that was somehow presumably murdered, and then that's why she was inhabiting this doll, because she was trying to make sure that maybe she was just hanging around that area even after her sudden death, and she wanted to be able to communicate with people who she believed to be friendly. By the way, I forgot to mention there was one incident before that seance that things took a little bit more of an eerie turn, and that was when Donna inspected the doll to one day find that there was some kind of blood, some kind of droplets of blood on the back of the doll's hands and on its chest as well. And while she was actually inspecting it, there was some kind of red substance, a liquidy red substance that also appeared right then and there on the doll. So that's when they decided to get this medium to try to perform the seance. So with that information, that they thought to themselves, you know what? This was all this time we thought it was something bad that was happening with the doll, but in turn it was just a little girl who was lonely and was trying to make sure that this girl Annabelle was able to, I guess, have some company because of her tragic death. And so part of the seance involved the doll asking the medium to ask Donna and Angie if they could give her permission to stay with them, to stay in the doll forever and then stay essentially in that apartment complex. And being the good-natured persons that they were, they said yes. Let's go ahead and let's say yes, and then that way we'll be able to comfort this little girl. Well, of course, as history would prove, this was not the case. This was not anything involving a little girl. And in fact, I'll cover that here in a few minutes. But a third account has to do with a bad experience happening to one of their friends. Donna and Angie had a male friend named Lou. Maybe he was the guy that the message was saying, help Lou. He was the friend of theirs. I don't know if he was particularly staying in that apartment during all this time, because the information I read said that he was there enough that he became quite familiar with the doll. And what he became familiar with, he was not liking. He was telling them several times, both Donna and Angie, that, hey, you got to get rid of this doll. This doll is evil. This is not a good thing to have. And they, I guess either before or after their seance, they were not listening to him, and they kept the doll around. And then that's when Lou, I guess, was able to get the doll's notice in a bad way, because Annabelle the doll was seeing that he was aware of truly what was happening, and how whatever was inhibiting that doll was not a good thing. So the doll was not liking this, and so on several occasions, this guy Lou, I guess he was sleeping over there in that apartment, he would have the very same recurring bad dream. Those of you who have these dreams, they seem to permeate in a lot of situations. It's the idea where it's a dream where you wake up and it seems like you're awake, but presumably you're still sleeping. But the most important thing is you can't move. You're paralyzed, so you can see, you can smell, you can in some cases feel exactly what's going on. You just can't move. Well, that was happening to him. It's a real panic-like state that people presume that apparently go through. I've never gone through anything like that myself, but others that I've read on the internet, that when they go through it, it's a pretty frightful experience. His case was a little bit more multiplied, because in his situation and in his dreams, he would look up or look towards the end of the bed, and then that's when he would see the Annabelle doll right there, just like staring back at him. Me, I got this thing against scary looking dolls. I mean, that's one of the things where, nope, I'm not having it. I'm not having it in my house. I'm not having anything that looks even like a doll, like anything freaky looking like a doll. It's just one of those things that is not happening. So imagine something like that happening, where it's staring straight at you at the end of the bed, and then to his horror, this thing, whatever it was that was within Annabelle, slowly started to glide up his leg while he's still paralyzed, presumably over the covers. It was gliding up on his leg. It moved over his chest, and then it sat down on his chest, all still while just staring at him. And then that's when things took a much more horrible turn, because according to Lou, what had happened was all of a sudden the doll began strangling him. It took its cute little arms, it took its cute little hands, and it wrapped them around his throat and then started strangling him. So much so that he was actually gasping for breath, according to his recount, and it was to the point where he actually passed out. I don't know again if it was in real life or if it was within his dream itself, but he passed out due to asphyxiation, and that's when he awoke the next morning. He was absolutely convinced that none of this was a dream, that it was 100% true, and that whatever this thing was that was within the doll itself was attacking him. But that wasn't it. He had one more experience that happened to be a bad thing. They were apparently appearing to take some kind of road trip. It was him and then Angie, and they were back in that apartment, and they're reading over some of the maps to take it, and then that's when they heard a huge noise or a huge commotion coming out of one of the rooms. That was Donna's rooms, actually. And when that happened, they thought that somebody was inside the apartment. We better go check it out. And then that's when Lou, being the guy, he decided to go in first. He quietly made his way straight to the door. Again, this was just him and Angie that were supposed to be in the apartment. Whatever it was within Donna's room was not supposed to be there, so that's why they approached it with severe caution. Who knows where Donna was at this time, but she was definitely not in the apartment. So he opened the door, and when he looked inside, he saw that it was empty as it should be, except Annabelle, the doll that he hated, was right there on the floor, somewhere towards the corner. She was tossed on the floor. It made it seem as if it was this thing was moving about, and then the minute the door opened, it just paused and stopped right where it was. Kind of like if you've ever seen the movie Toy Story, which I'm sure you have. There's that scene where the dolls are moving as quickly as possible, and then when someone enters the room, they just stop dead right there, like a couple seconds before, wherever they're at. And even if it looks a little awkward, that's where they're standing still. And that's what happened with Annabelle. She was there on the floor towards the corner. So he here was trying to figure out, Lou was trying to figure out, what was going on, what was the source of this noise. He couldn't really think that it was the doll itself. But then he sensed, and this was while the doll was still in front of him, he sensed something behind him. And when he did so, he turned, he saw nothing there, but that was apparently the distraction that was needed. Because what had happened was, as he turned to check what was behind him, that's when he felt like this severe slash of some sort straight across his chest, so much so that it actually caused him to double over. And then this poor guy Lou checked his shirt, and he saw that there was blood seeping from whatever had slashed him. He opened up his shirt, and then that's when he saw on his chest 7 distinct claw marks, 3 of them vertically across his chest, and then 4 horizontally. The way he described it was they all felt like they were hot like burns, like whatever had scratched him. It might have been like anything involving a knife that was laying on a stove nearby of some sort. The strange thing about these scratches too is, despite the pain, again, it was so much that it originally caused him to double over. These scratches almost immediately healed, and then by the next day were half gone, and then by the day after that, just 2 days later, they were completely gone. Again, defying anything as far as any normal scratches that you and I would associate with. This was enough for everyone within the apartments to realize, hey, this is not working out. Something really bad is happening here. So Donna tried to seek some kind of spiritual advice. She met with a priest named Father Hegan. He recommended somebody named Father Cook, who was familiar with a couple who go by the name of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Now this is where things go a different turn, because the story shifts more towards them. Ed and Lorraine Warren are, of course, infamous for being some of the most well-known, I guess the official term that they call themselves is demonologists, but who knows what else they deal with. And they're famous for being able to come about in certain, almost like detectives of some sort, and being able to come about on certain properties and find out what's going on, and then trying to take care of whatever that situation is by, in most cases, taking possession of those things that they determine to be either haunted or possessed, and then being able to take them back to their place to ensure that they no longer cause harm to anyone else. Such was the case in this particular situation. Ed and Lorraine Warren, the minute that they heard what was happening with this Annabelle doll, they decided to come over, and then that's when they, according to, I guess, the symptoms that everyone involved in the apartment was describing, that's when they realized that something else was going on entirely. They said that this was the case of some kind of demonic spirit of some sort, and it was basically able to follow a set of patterns based on the predictability of everyone involved, from Donna to Angie to Lou, because the way they described it was, whatever this thing was, whatever it decided to do there with them, it decided to do it with the doll, and it wanted to make sure that the doll was able to catch the attention of particularly Donna and Angie. And the reason for this was because the more attention that it was able to draw from them, it feeds off of that attention and it gains more power. But it only reaches a certain point of power when it comes to the doll itself, because the way they described it is anything involving these spirits, whatever they do, they can only reach a certain point before they have to move to the next level, which involves trying to, instead of possess or take control of some kind of inanimate object, to try to take control of people themselves. And so they followed the predictable pattern of Donna and Angie. The spirit knew that they would contact the medium, and then pretending to be the little girl, then the medium would ask permission of trying to help and them trying to say, yes, go forth, little girl, and stay with us as long as you can. And once that thing, whatever it was, had that permission, then it would start to move towards the next level, which is creating fear, which is creating dread, feeding off of that power that this fear creates, and then finally moving on towards its final step, which is actual possession of the people themselves. The way that the Warrens told the poor girls there is, if these set of experiences, especially culminating with what happened to poor Lou, lasted for another 2 to 3 weeks, then what would happen was somebody would have gotten seriously harmed or potentially killed, because that was the whole intent of whatever this thing was, whatever the spirit was that decided to cause great fear towards the girls and towards the guy there in the apartment. That was its ultimate goal, according to what they said. So the Warrens decided that this was another case where they would take this thing, this doll in this case, the Annabelle doll, with them, so that way they could take it away from the apartment complex and have them cause no more harm. They were able to do some kind of resuscitation of like an exorcism blessing and cleanse the apartment, and when that happened, I guess to this day there hasn't been anything bad going on with those people or with the apartment itself. So they took the doll and they placed it into a place that they call the Warrens Occult Museum, which is located there in Monroe, Connecticut. It's actually it's a real place, a real museum that people can go and visit to this day. It's an entire collection of a lifetime's worth of several other Annabelle doll-like objects, the kind of stuff that the Warrens again collected to make sure that they could not cause damage to the people that possessed them in their locations. And this is a place where it's sold out. From what I understand, it's consistently and always sold out. Ed Lorraine died a while back, so it's just the lady, Mrs. Lorraine, there now. She's the one that runs the museum. But every year she houses it several times a year, if I'm not mistaken, where you could buy a tour. It's basically her having a little Q&A of some sort there at her home, and then finally the last part of the tour is visiting the bottom of the home towards the basement, and then that's where this museum is located. And sitting in one of the most, I guess, pristine places, the ones that catch the most attention, is the Annabelle doll itself. It's there. It's one of the hot spots there. People go there specifically to the occult museum to see the doll itself, and it's one of the main attractions there. You'll see that it says on the front, warning, positively do not open. I think there's another sign there where it's something along the lines of do not touch, do not antagonize, anything along those lines, because to their recollection, this Annabelle doll is still alive. It's still possessed by whatever it was that was haunting the apartment complex there before they obtained the doll itself. But because they placed it into this special box or glass of some sort, it cannot move anywhere. There are some stories though still tied to the Annabelle doll and what it happened to do to the Warrens themselves. Apparently while they took possession of the doll and took it away from the apartment, Ed was driving and he was kind of suspicious that this doll was not liking the fact that it was now being taken away from its mission, and so he realized that he better be really careful. And so as he was driving home with that doll, he told Mrs. Warren that he's not going to drive on the highway because he knew that whatever was still residing within this doll would try to make sure that it could escape. And what better way to do so than to try to cause some kind of accident? And then he was ultimately proven correct, because he said that as he was trying to drive just on the side of a road, he's coming up on some kind of curve, and he suddenly found that the car itself was losing its power steering, and then it was also losing its brakes, and so much so that he was repeatedly on the verge of colliding, not with other cars I think, but just colliding off the side of the road. And so knowing that of course that the doll was doing this, he reached back into the back seat where the doll was located. He took out from his black bag next to the doll a vial of holy water, and that's when he doused the doll. And he's reportedly made signs of the crosses several times over, and that seemed to calm the doll itself. So he brought the doll back to the home afterward, and then that's when reports were that the doll again was mad at the fact that it was away from its home, what it considered to be its home, that apartment complex. And so the Lorraines mentioned that the doll would be found floating. It would be found in other places, in other parts of the house itself, very similar to what was happening with the apartment complex. And then finally they decided that they wanted to go ahead and try to keep the doll one place together, and that's when they put it into the actual glass enclosure where it's found to this day. Other people have cited other experiences. Apparently, the Mr. Warren Ed, he said that he had a father over, a guy by the name of Jason Bradford, and to him, he didn't really consider the doll to be any kind of serious problem of some sort. In fact, it was reported that he grabbed the doll, picked it up, and said something along the lines of, "You're just a rag doll, Annabelle. You can't hurt anyone," and then just kind of threw it back on the chair, at which point Ed, knowing, of course, that this was a really serious matter, said, "You better not say something like that again." And they wanted to make sure that the priest would not be harmed, and so they begged the priest to try to make sure that they could call him back as soon as he got home safely. But that's when he called later on, and he said actually he was involved within a very bad accident. His brakes failed as he was entering some kind of busy intersection, and he was involved in a near fatal accident. And they all pointed towards the fact that it was because him making fun of the light of the doll itself and not taking it as seriously as it could. The last instance known about this doll doing anything to anybody happens to be while it resided within that museum itself. Apparently there was some guy, no name though as to who this guy was, only that the fact that he was a young man of some sort. He was there with his girlfriend taking the tour, and then part of the tour involved, of course, visiting the occult museum. So once he was down there, he seemed to be somebody that was a bit of a hothead, and despite the fact that the Lorraine said, when you're down here, you do not do anything, you do not touch anything, just treat everything with the respect that it kind of deserves to ensure that you don't get any harm. This guy was not having it. Apparently he went up straight to that glass enclosure containing the Annabelle doll. He began banging on it several times, stating that he knew about this doll being able to scratch other people, and he wanted to be scratched. He was that kind of bravado hothead, the kind of guy that wants to make sure that he gets all the attention, it seems. At that point, he was getting kicked out because Lorraine was not having any of it. He said, "Son, you need to leave," and so he took him out of the building. And whenever the young man left with his girlfriend, they apparently left on a motorcycle. The girlfriend later said that as they were driving back to wherever they were coming from, they were still talking and laughing about the doll and the fact that, hey, it's just a doll, what's with the ridiculousness associated with it. But that's when all of a sudden the guy lost control of his motorcycle and they went straight into a tree. The girl said that the young guy was killed instantly, but she survived, but not unharmed. She was hospitalized for well over a year. And so that goes to show another instance, another proof that anything involving this doll, it deserves the respect that it deserves, because anybody that takes it on, especially in a defiant manner, such as that father, that guy that father did, and then also with this other young guy, then they're met with some bad consequences. But there it is to this day. Apparently it still houses that location there in the occult museum. Just as a cursory, I wanted to check it out. There's the website for it that the Lorraines have, and you can click on the tour option. But yeah, it's still sold out for quite some time. So if you ever wanted to be brave enough or brash enough and take a tour, she'll have this tour several times a year. She's a little bit elderly now, so my understanding is she doesn't really do these too often. But if you do, then you can visit the bottom level, which is what everybody goes for the tour for, and that's where you can see the real life doll itself, the Annabelle doll, to this day. In fact, here's another picture too. It showcases one of the actors from The Conjuring visiting the doll. I thought I read though that the actors all said that they didn't really want to visit that place because they'd rather stay away from it. But I guess this guy decided, that was okay. But yeah, that's where the doll is to this day. So that's the story of Annabelle the doll. If anyone has any more information, something I didn't cover here, it'd be great to hear. If anyone has ever visited that occult museum and actually seen the doll itself, there are pictures on the internet, people visiting it, taking pictures, selfies, if you will, of themselves right next to the doll. It'd be great to hear any experiences that someone has there as well. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.